So there's a well-known musical phrase that jazz musicians have dubbed the lick. People started noticing that the lick was showing up everywhere in the vocabulary of great jazz musicians. So there are compilation videos and memes and fanfare around using and playing the lick. But what happens after you go about actually learning it? How do you go about turning a lick like this into actual jazz improvisation? Let's start going over some strategies. So let's just start out by defining what the lick actually is. So here's a D minor 7th chord. And this is typically what we hear the lick being played over top of, although it can be played over a multitude of different chords. It starts on the 5th tone, and it sounds like this. It's a pretty simple but satisfying idea, but like I said, there's a big difference between learning a lick like this and actually improvising. We have the lick or the musical idea over here, but we need to figure out how to bridge the gap to actual jazz improvisation, which is what we all actually are trying to do. So one great strategy to start bridging that gap is something called recomposition. And within recomposition are 3 tools I want to share with you for actually going about doing that. But first, what is recomposition? Recomposition is simply taking an original idea like the lick, morphing it, changing it, into something else that still resembles the original idea, but has an entirely new identity of its own. And closer to the end of the video, I'll talk about why this is such a powerful process, but let's start going over some of these tools. So tool number 1 is called harmonic origin. So when we take a look at the lick, we see that we're playing the chord D minor 7. Now another little thing to notice is that there is 0 sharps or flats in the key signature, which would either mean we're in the key of C major or the key of A minor. But when we're talking about harmonic origin, what I really want to look at is what are the notes within the lick. So like I said, we start on the 5th. Okay, and when we really look at this, we're actually using notes strictly from what we call the Dorian mode. And the Dorian mode looks and sounds like this. Now the word Dorian sounds a little bit intimidating, but the best way to think about the Dorian mode is it is the 2nd mode of the major scale. Now, 2nd means that it is starting and ending on the 2nd scale tone of some major scale. So the way we can think about this is what major scale has D natural as the 2nd scale tone? Well, if you think about it, it's C major. So really, we're just dealing with the C major scale, probably the most basic thing you can play. But the Dorian mode, all it means is we're starting and ending the C major scale on D natural, the 2nd scale tone. And when we look at the lick, it's really playing all the notes from the Dorian mode. That's harmonic origin. But of course, the question is, how do we use this for recomposition? So let's recompose this and start on a different tone of the Dorian mode. So in this case, let's start on F natural and try to mimic the same kind of intervallic formula as the original. Again, here's the original. So again, the same mode, but a slightly different result because we're starting on a different scale tone. Now, of course, we don't always have to mimic the same intervallic formula. So let's play the exact same lick here, except for just change the last 2 notes up a little bit from the original intervallic formula. Original. So what I'm going to do here in this example is I'm just going to start the lick on a different scale tone within the Dorian mode. So in this case, let's start on the root, and it sounds like this. Okay, the original is this, and the new one is. So it sounds the same because we're using essentially the same intervallic formula, but we're starting on a different note in the Dorian mode, giving us a slightly different result. Moving on to tool number 2, which is melodic direction. Now again, taking a look at the original lick, when I'm talking about melodic direction, I literally mean the direction. So we start by going up in pitch, then we go down in pitch, we go down in pitch again, and then finally we go up in pitch again. And I'm, again, not talking about the intervallic formula necessarily, I'm just talking about the direction in which the melody flows. Now, in all the licks we've done so far, we've copied the exact same melodic direction and almost the exact same intervallic formula. But when we're talking about recomposition, essentially I want to reimagine the melodic direction of this lick. So take a look at this example right here. Basically what I'm gonna do is the opposite of what the original does, which is we're gonna go down in pitch, then up in pitch, down in pitch, and then up in pitch again. And it sounds like this. The original. The essence of the lick is still there, but the direction has changed, and you can go ahead and compose as many different versions of that as possible. Tool number 3 is rhythmic variation. So looking again at the original lick, we have a set of different rhythms that we're dealing with. Particularly, we have this first 4/8 note batch here, then we have a quarter note, and then 2 eighth notes, with the last eighth note being tied to a whole note. That is the rhythmic makeup of this lick. And in so far in all the recompositions we've done, we've copied this exact same rhythmic makeup. But rhythmic variation is where we're going to reimagine what the rhythmic structure could possibly be, while still trying to aim towards the direction of that original lick. So I recompose one right here where I'm taking the rhythms and making them mostly eighth notes. So we have a string of eighth notes going up, a string of eighth notes going down and up, tying to this whole note at the end. Now, one other thing to pay attention here is also we're using notes that are outside of the Dorian mode now, which is another thing we want to start thinking about. In this case, we're using a C sharp and we're using a G sharp. But in jazz, we're often using these to approach other scale tones in the key or chord tones within the chord. So here's what it sounds like. Now there's a huge important step that we have left to start bridging this gap that I was talking about. And of course that is improvisation, which we'll get to in 1 second. However, it's important to understand what composition or recomposition is in the first place. And that's simply taking the improvisation process and slowing it down. It's giving us the opportunity to think through these tools, to reimagine the idea that we learned verbatim and transform it into something else. But we're not doing it on the fly like you would improvisation. We're taking the time to imagine how to actually do it so that this becomes a more natural process when we go to improvisation. So with all of that in mind, let me start improvising, thinking about some of these tools, thinking about the original lick, and going from there. Okay, so you heard me quoting the lick in there, you heard me referencing the lick in there, you heard me abandoning the lick altogether, but then coming back to it. And really that's the heart of what we should all be doing in our improvisation all of the time. But obviously we need to have a lot of different ideas so that we can fuel this recomposition and then improvisation. So one great way to do that is to learn jazz solos by ear. So on the screen right now, I have a video that's gonna help you learn jazz solos by ear, give you a very clear and easy process so you can start doing this right away. So click that video on the screen. Of course, if you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you've never done so before, and we'll see you in the next video.